Morena, everyone. Kia ora, welcome. Ko Frian Wadia Toko Ingoa. I am the founder and chairperson for NATINA, Neuroscience and Trauma Informed Network Aotearoa. And I have with me here today Jase Williams for our very first kōrero of this year. Really excited to have you here, Jase. We'll get going once I've done the karakia and then we'll do a little introduction. So kia ora and welcome. All right. Karakia timatanga. Manakitia teine hui, manakitia teine ropu, manakitia teine whānau. Tai noa ki teine kaupapa. Arahina na kōrero, arahina na papai, arahina na ture nei, kia puta ai te maramatanga. So bless this meeting, bless this group, bless this family as we come together, guide the discussion, guide the questions, guide the intent so that we move onwards to greater understanding. Amine. So welcome, Jace. Really excited to have you here. Now Jace is a dear friend. He's somebody who has really inspired me, encouraged me to get going when, systems fail and systems don't support us. So really always proud of the mahi you do, Jace, and grateful for the mahi you do because it is so needed, and it takes a lot of courage, a lot of vulnerability, to go out and do the work that you're doing. So thank you. But I'm going to do your formal introduction and read this out. So Jace is an educator, facilitator, and author working in the spaces of trauma-informed practice, relational neuroscience, and mātauranga Māori. Jace brings to the table not just information and knowledge, but wisdom and practical insights through his lived experience and years of working alongside tamariki, rangatahi, whānau, and educators. What I love is that he invites us to really slow down, reflect, and rethink what we've been taught about resilience, behavior, and using a really strengths-based approach. Checking in with your intuition, using your gut to guide you along the way. And Jace offers professional development, community wānanga, and advocacy that uplifts tamariki and rangatahi through belonging, compassion, and unconditional love. So we are going to be talking today about the book that Jace has written, Your Trauma Has a Whakapapa. And Jace shares so much about the neuroscience behind the understanding and healing of trauma, but also he's linked a whole lot of te ao Māori and understanding of indigenous ways through the pūrākau that come alongside all of it. And the book really emphasizes the importance of understanding our whakapapa when we embark on that journey of healing ourselves, and also how do we become our authentic selves and bring along everything that we've got through our whakapapa. And I think breaking those cycles and creating the way forward for our tamariki and mokopuna as we move along. So thank you for coming along, Jace. Really excited to have you here. I will hand over to you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself. And also, I'd love to hear what you've been up to this year, because I know you started in that education space. You have done a lot of work in the education sector, so to speak, but you've also moved on to working with men and a lot more in that sort of, space as well. So yeah, just fill us in on what you've been up to so far. Kia ora and
Cool. Kia
welcome.
ora, Frian. I'm incredibly jet lagged right now. I'm over in Denver, Colorado, in the US, and I've just been jumping across different time zones back and forth. So at one stage, I was 20 hours behind New Zealand, then it was 16, then 18, then 20, then 16. It's just, I don't know if I'm coming or going, but it's lovely to be here. Shout out to the people that have checked in online at like 7 in the morning. That is crazy. But yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. So I guess to coin a phrase from my friend Linda Knight, like relational neuroscience is I guess the domain, what I speak about mostly. And I try to do it through a Te Ao Māori lens, drawing on my experience as a former school principal, as an educator for the last 25 years. So drawing on those experiences. And I guess for me, um, yeah, this knowledge and this kaupapa, this whakaaro has helped me better understand who I am as a person. And that wasn't in the cards at the beginning. My journey was really about how are we going to help kids at school behave better, I guess was part of it, be in a better position to learn. And then you start unpacking what behavior actually means, and you realize that children are just reacting or responding to overwhelming stress in the body. So I guess that I've kind of chopped and changed like based on different influences. So for me, the primary influence was Dr. Bruce Perry. And I came across his work, and I didn't know who he was, to be honest, the first time I came across Bruce. And when he started telling stories from his book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, they really resonated because although there were stories about some horrific incidences and experience that happened to American children, these are very much the children that I had worked at in different schools. And I also saw friends and my own family in the book. And I wasn't as self-aware as I am now at that time, but I was in the book as well. So that really drew me to the work because what Bruce did was he gave me words to help explain some of the intuitive things I was doing as a leader and as an educator.
Mm.
So we had introduced yoga and breath work a long time ago. And I didn't know that it was regulatory. I didn't know that it was helping calm and soothe the nervous system. I didn't know any of those things.
Yeah.
We just put it in place because we were having kids turning up to school late. And those children were already on the back foot, and probably something happened on the way to school, something before school, or something the night before. So we wanted to put them in a place where there's an equitable start to learning. So again, what Bruce did was he gave us the words to explain some of these. I guess crazy was the way people describe the things we were doing in our own school community. People didn't understand the yoga. People didn't understand our focus on social emotional learning. So yeah, that was really the start. And now I provide professional development and learning for schools, anywhere from ECE and Koangareo to all the way through to high schools, Kaupapa Māori, specialist schools, lots of different spaces. But it's really the work with men that I've really loved doing. And again, selfishly, this has helped me with my own healing through helping other people. And again, it started out by trying to help other people and then realizing, man, I've got lots of shit and there's stuff I need to do to help with my healing process. But yeah, that's a lot of the work I do. So I do some mahi through the Ministry of Social Development in the Changemaker program. I do work alongside gangs. I've done work inside men's prisons. So some pretty diverse spaces. And one thing you realize is no matter who you are or where you come from, everyone is impacted by trauma in some kind of way. Trauma doesn't discriminate. So yeah, that's kept me busy. And at the moment I'm overseas, so I spent some time, gosh, what even day is it? Tuesday, Wednesday for you guys. So
Wednesday.
I was in, yeah, I was in just north of Vancouver last week speaking to an early childhood conference audience. And I'm flying to a place called Whitehorse, Yukon, which the temperature will be around minus 30 degrees Celsius, not Fahrenheit, Celsius, minus 30. And I'm speaking at a First Nations Indigenous conference there, which I'm absolutely can't wait to speak at because I believe I'm the only non-First Nations person there at the conference speaking. So I'm really looking forward to that opportunity and sharing some of our culture and picking up on some of the culture that's shared as well. So that's keeping me really busy. Yeah.
That's amazing. Jace, I remember having the conversation with you and Dr. Andre and so many others, Susan, about, before we even started NATINA, about how do we weave Te Ao Māori, how do we, bring together that Te Ao Māori and Western worldview sort of, around this whole understanding of neuroscience and trauma-informed approaches. And so I'm so excited that you have done that through your book and you have, woven that through. And I mean, at a practical level, once you know a lot about the repetition, the rhythm and stuff like that, things like waiata and, a lot of the sort of ways of being culturally help with a lot of that predictability and repetition and things like
Mm,
that. But um, what's been really interesting is you have woven actually some of the, I would say, te ao Māori um, theory behind it through the pūrākau, because that gives you an understanding, how even the
mm,
pūrākau sort of help us understand better about the neuroscience of, how we live our lives, how we show up, how we manage our emotions. So that's been really, really interesting for me as I was reading the book. And it's a real, real sort of eye opener. And honestly, we could do a whole session about that today. But we will do that another time. I've got a few questions for you. And the biggest one is how and where did your journey start around this whole understanding of Te Ao Māori and how it supports all of the neuroscience sort of learning that you did, because you started out with the NME workshop you did, sort of training
mm.
you did and all of that. So how has that sort of really helped you, but also in terms of finding your own identity and whakapapa, where and how has it all come about? Was it a conscious decision that you made, I'm going to actually look back at my whakapapa and start out with you know who I am and where I come from, and sort of delve into it? Or was this a part of the journey, that just happened because you were writing the book? How did the title come about?
Mm.
And what were some of those practical barriers that you've had to overcome in terms of, I guess, really leaning into your whakapapa? I personally think I've always been in the here and now. I've never had a lot of whakapapa other than my, direct sort of grandparents that I grew
Mm.
up with and sort of know about and things like that. But your book really made me think about, the importance of understanding where we come from, what went on in their lives, and how that might impact us. And that really sort of made me realize I don't even know where to start. I don't even know where to look back or how to go about it. So I'm really interested in knowing that journey of yours. How did you sort of make those connections? And yeah, where did it start? The chicken or the egg, which came first,
Yeah. So I guess for me, it's been a real new journey in lots and lots of ways. Like I didn't know I was Māori until I was 10 years of age.
Yeah.
Obviously, for anyone looking at me, you can see, but I didn't know I was. So I was brought up very much what I would class as say middle class Pākehā would be my upbringing in lots of ways. I had a dad that was smacked at school for speaking his own language. His parents only spoke Te Reo Māori. Um, they were also beaten at school for speaking their language. My dad was the youngest of quite a number of siblings, and there's a decent age gap between him being the youngest and the next eldest. So in a lot of ways, he was the baby of the family, but also quite isolated and separated in some ways from his siblings. Now,
Mhm.
interestingly, my grandparents, my nanny and koro, who I never got to meet, they died when my dad was in his early teenage years. So dad was whānau'd by other whānau, and dad was one day grabbed off the streets of Paeroa and sent down to Otago to a residential boys' home down there, just because he was loitering around the streets and not where he was supposed to be, which was probably school, and was sent down there for quite a while. My dad passed away 28 years ago, so he's not here to tell the story. But what I do know is what kind of dad my dad could be when he was drinking. And I know what kind of partner my dad was to my mother, again, when he was drinking. Drinking was a real issue for dad. So, yeah, identity and belonging is something that I've really struggled with for most of my life. And I didn't realize, but you start to, I mean, I've said this and people usually resonate with this. When you hit your 40s, if you haven't done the inner work needed and the healing that's been needed at that stage, then all your shit's coming up, right? I can see people nodding in the chat.
Yeah.
So for me, that was kind of like the first lot of breadcrumbs, I guess, to start following that trail to figure out, what does that mean? Why do I feel the way I do about these things? So I think about relationships that I've had with my wife now, previous partners, my relationship with my own children, my relationship, say, with work colleagues, children I've taught across the years. And there will be people that had a really good experience with me. And there'll also be people that wouldn't have had a good experience. And all I can say to that is that I was unaware, like completely unaware of how I was and the impacts, good or bad, that I had on other people. And that's what happens when you don't know who you are or where you come from, right? So this sense of belonging, I know now that a sense of belonging is everything. It is as important to us as the air that we actually breathe. And if we don't feel that sense of belonging, then we'll either try to fit in or we'll disconnect. And I've spent a lot of my life trying to fit in. I know now how damaging that is to try and fit in. Because I couldn't fit in, I found ways to disconnect. And both fitting in and disconnection are really, really negative experiences for people, for human beings. Like, everyone just wants to be seen, heard, known, valued, and loved. And when you don't feel those things, then you will try and find that somewhere else. So for me, I've spent a lot of my life disconnecting from people, from friends, from lots of different spaces, because it wasn't safe to me or safe for me to, I didn't feel like I belonged in places. Like, the education system's a great example. So I think back to when I was standard 4 or year 6 for the younger people in the room. And I remember at school, and I haven't told the story too often. There's no reason why, but I'm not sure if you remember the 40-hour famine.
Yes.
It might still be a thing. I'm not sure if it's still a thing, right? But I remember at school, we were being encouraged to do the 40-hour famine. I remember doing it, but we watched a video on TV. So the teacher wheeled in the trolley that has the TV and the VCR, and we watched a video, and it was an advertising campaign for the 40-hour famine. And one of the children in the class, one of my friends actually, mentioned loud enough so everyone could hear it, that I looked like one of the African kids on the video. Now, I'm one of the only brown kids in the entire class. So I was incredibly embarrassed and upset. But, this is the 80s, and you're told to harden up and get over it. So I didn't cry. I was absolutely crying on the inside, though. And the part that really hurt was the teacher's reaction. So they had this grin on their face with it, and they were trying to stop themselves from laughing of what one of my friends had said. And that's a teacher that I really liked at that point. So that was a rupture in connection with that teacher from then on. I remember being an intermediate and being offered opportunities to be in the Māori cultural group. It wasn't called kapaka back then, the Māori group. And, people sniggered and laughed when that was offered as an opportunity. So I wasn't going to put myself out there for something other people laughed at. At high school, being offered languages that we can take up, and being pushed towards taking French and Japanese, because Te Reo Māori was not a good option because no one spoke it. That was what we were told back then. So any kind of opportunities to be Māori were taken away from me or ridiculed in lots of ways. So that's a long way of answering your question, but really the journey for me has been something that I've picked up a lot later in life. When I've become more self-aware, when I've become more aware of the whakapapa of my trauma and where it comes from. Like, I think about my dad who was abusive when he drank, and the work that I've done to heal in that space, but also to understand that my dad did the best he could based on his experiences as a child and losing his parents young. And, I haven't always felt like that towards my dad. There was a time where, when I heard of how abusive he was to my mum, where I wished my dad had been alive, and that I would have put him through a fucking wall, right? So I've always felt loving and compassionate towards what my dad went through. But now, because I've done a lot of inner work on myself, I can hold that space for him, and love him unconditionally. So it's been a real journey for me. it's been hard because I don't kōrero Māori. I don't speak te reo Māori. I have a basic level. I've struggled to learn te reo Māori.
Yeah.
I'm in one of those spaces where, and I've always felt like this, whether this is real or imagined,
Yeah.
I've always felt that I was always too brown for our education system, but I wasn't brown enough for my own people. So I kind of like to try to fit and navigate disconnect. So for a long time in my life, I felt like I don't belong anywhere, and now I feel like I do.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, like some of the pūrākau that I shared in the book, and some of the te ao Māori approaches, philosophies, that's new learning that's come through writing the book and doing research. Some of it has been stuff that I've known for a number of years, but I guess have fine tuned my understanding. And I guess part of it for me is that our pūrākau, a number of our pūrākau, there are gaps in them because of the impacts of colonization, because of like the Tohunga Suppression Act,
Yeah.
which had us we had to stop talking Māori, we had to stop using our practices of healing. So there are some gaps in some of our pūrākau. So this generation, my generation, and the generation just before me, and the generations that come after me, we are, I guess, backfilling in some ways some of our pūrākau, so that future generations don't have to. They have this solid understanding. So when I'm sharing pūrākau, I have a real like relational neuroscience lens when I listen to pūrākau, when I'm hearing them, and when I'm reading pūrākau, I'm looking for the trauma, which sounds really weird, but I'm looking for the links to what I know, right? And when I tell the pūrākau of Papa Tuanuku, and she's holding space for her two young sons as the older brothers are in these epic battles, she focuses on her own state of being through breath work, right? Now, we didn't use the word co-regulation back then, but that's absolutely what she's doing. So I think there's a real beauty in our indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing and being here. And it's really interesting being north of Vancouver in an area called Squamish, and listening to some of their stories. And man, there's some synergy there, right? They're almost the same stories, different characters, slightly different scenarios, but they're almost the same story. So we have these rich stories. And even at that conference, by me openly sharing, it allowed other people to start sharing some of their knowledge, because in that community, very, very trauma informed. You know, you're talking about a community that's only like an hour away from where Gabor Mate lives. So for the past 20, 30 years in that community, they're so trauma informed. But when I'm sharing these stories, like, people aren't used to telling stories, they're used to theoretical knowledge. And I thought that was really beautiful. So me being vulnerable gave permission for other people to share and be vulnerable as well. So yeah, for me, this is a newish journey. You could argue that it's been one I've been on for 40 plus years, really. It's inside me. It's always been there. It's just, it's now, I guess, unlocked is the best way to say it. Now, the title of the book, Your Trauma Has A Whakapapa, I went through like a whole bunch of titles in my head. And as I wrote the book, this one kind of came to the surface. So the book started out I'll go back a little bit further. So maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, I had this idea of writing a book, and it was really pushed by two good friends of mine, Kirsty and Scott Radovanovich. And so I started, and I wrote maybe 2 or 3 chapters and reworked them. I was pretty happy with it at the time. And then that whole imposter syndrome kicks in, and you think, oh, no one's going to want to read it. So you put it on the back burner, and then you delete it, and then you delete it from your recently deleted, so then it's gone. Then you go on Google Drive and try and recover it, and then you start writing it again. So it was a really just in bits and pieces and spits and spurts. It kind of, I did bits and pieces of it. So it wasn't until I went to therapy myself. So a lot of my healing comes from just having a better understanding. Like, I think I've read every book in the space. I really do. I listen to podcasts nonstop. I'm listening to books all the time. I do lots of traveling, so I'm just immersed in this stuff. And I've sat with thousands of people and just listen to their stories, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of my healing just comes from that. And
Yeah.
then my best friend, Matt Brown, said to me, if there was ever, well, had I ever considered therapy? And I said to him, yeah, I had, but I don't feel like right now that I need to go to therapy. And he said, but would you, if you felt you needed to? I said, absolutely. And I got to this point where I felt like, yeah, let's try therapy and see how it is. So the type of therapy I do is somatic therapy.
Mhm.
It has been incredibly healing for me. I work with a lady called Jacinda Gilligan. She works at Soma in Christchurch, so we do it online. And it's been one of the most healing experiences I've ever taken part in.
Yeah.
And what happened was once I did the somatic therapy, all the words just flowed. All these words just like literally came out of me, and within weeks I'd written a draft of a book, which is crazy to think that for years I tried, but once I did the therapy, it was just like
Yeah.
it's just all there, and reworked it a little bit. So it started out as being, how do I help educators better understand how to be trauma informed in the education system? And I thought if I wove in a couple of stories, like personal stories, stories of me trying to implement this stuff in practice, that would be really helpful for people. But what ended up happening was the complete opposite, that it was the stories that came to the surface
Yeah.
and the neuroscience was wrapped around it. So yeah, not as I planned it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but based on some of the feedback, and the feedback is crazy. It's so overwhelming to me because I know how absolutely therapeutic the process was of writing this book and how emotional it was. And there's so many tears like writing it, and actually even better understanding of who I am and how I'm perceived by others through writing the book. But to hear how the book has impacted other people is it's really humbling. Like I had one lady, she's spoken to her mum for the first time in 20 years after reading the book. And it's just like, wow, I couldn't foresee any of that. I mean, I'm just happy it's helping people.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, look, honestly, I'm so glad it hasn't just been focused on educators or education, Jace, because this work is so much more than just that one space, isn't it? And um, I mean, you know how it is. Like when we were looking at Natina, exactly the same thing. We were focused on education, and as soon as sort of we started having those conversations, there were people connecting from different walks of life and going, actually, it's needed here,
Yeah.
it's needed here. And like you, I think for me, what I've realized is it's your own journey, isn't it? That work that you have to do. Um, and and I think I did the same thing of like, let me get all the information, all the knowledge, and then I can become trauma informed. And actually now
Yeah.
I am I'm actually going, I need to get less information and I need to just
Mm,
embody what I've learned. I need to practice what I've learned. I need to really, really focus on the slowing down. And I think that's the real work, isn't it? And you've talked about it in your book about just sitting with the discomfort. So
mm.
important that we are actually able to sit with it and not just rush through it, not sort of skim over it through the busyness or the knowledge you're trying to gain all the time. So I think for me, it was really, really powerful going through this book and just being able to feel acknowledged, feel seen, and know that, I am on my sort of pathway, that is sort of, heading towards really embodying some of that stuff that I'm learning. So,
I
so
think you
that's
just nailed it. Like the last 2 or 3 minutes you've been speaking, you need to make a clip of that because that's the answer. Like I look on, man, it frustrates me so much when people are still in education system, like still obsessed with resources. Here's a picture that explains this. That oh my gosh, Ross Green is coming back. Like all this shit. I'm over it. It frustrates me so much because we just want the quick fix. We want the easy answer, but no one will actually spend the time to do the fucking work on themselves.
yeah,
Like I said, it's our own inner work we need to do, not a resource, not a program, shit, not even a book,
yeah,
right? It's really the inner work we need to do. So,
yeah,
because to me, all those resources mean nothing. They
yeah,
mean nothing if we show up in that space and we've got all these resources and frameworks, But then we sit with a child, and this child is dysregulated, and then our inner child shows up. None of that stuff matters if we haven't done the inner work on ourselves, right? So thank you for saying that, because that is absolutely the answer. We've got to do our own work. And when we do our own work,
Yeah.
we are in a better position to sit with others. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It's not any harder than that. And I think back to, and Linda will resonate with this. Like, we both sat with the former Minister of Education, Jan Tinetti,
Mhm.
who was supportive of trauma-informed practice. But the system doesn't know what to do with that,
Yeah.
because we're essentially talking about energy and vibrations. This is a way of being. And like, how do you create a framework or a program? You can't.
Yeah.
And that's why people have struggled with this approach. And I have this even now. Like, I work with schools,
Yeah.
and you can see the people that really just aren't buying in, because we're so used to there's going to be a program, a framework, a matrix, a rubric, all this shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And none of that matters. None of it matters. Mm.
It's really interesting, Jace. One of the things that I've learned over this period of time, these few years sort of doing some of this work and then learning about it all, is you can't force people to learn any of this and then expect to get results. I think people have to be ready to take this on board and then put it into practice, isn't it? And I think you talked about self-awareness, and I'm going to read this out because this was really, really interesting. So you said self-awareness isn't as common as you might think. Most people are walking through life unaware of who they are, where their behaviors come from, and how their pain leaks into the lives of others, especially those closest to them. And I used to feel, so I started my journey obviously with advocacy for inclusion, because of my kids and stuff. And I used to feel that if I give people all the information about children's rights and about disability rights and, the enabling good life principles and the research around inclusion, then people will become inclusive towards my children. Schools will be welcoming, they'll, work in inclusive ways. And what I learned is you can't have any of that happening without the heart and the willingness to actually be inclusive. And so it's the same thing with this work. I've realized you can't force people to become self-aware. And in fact, what I've realized is the more you try to give information or force the information, the more you trigger resistance and the more you trigger the really negative behaviors. And I've learned this through real practical sort of, experiences that I just have to pull back at some point and go, you know what? I'm just going to keep doing my work. I'm just going to keep working on myself. I'm just going to keep showing up the way I want people to show up and then hope that they're going to eventually see that. They're going to actually notice that and take some of it on board. But I think
Mm.
that forcing the information just doesn't work. And it's really hard, isn't it? Because when you're wanting to make the change, the systemic change that that
Yeah.
that can impact so many more. How have you dealt with it? Because I know it used to be really frustrating. Back in the days, you were like, damn them, like, they're not doing it. I'm going to do my own thing. You've
Yeah.
obviously embarked on your own journey, but what has this been for you? When you come across people lacking the self-awareness, how do you work on it? I don't know. This is what I've done. I've just given up and gone, I'm just going to focus on myself. I can't keep burning the energy trying to create self-awareness for somebody else, right? So what have you done? What has there been anything that worked better for you? What's your sort of way
Mm.
working with people who lack that self-awareness?
Yeah, I absolutely resonate with that. That is very similar to my journey. And like I said, you can't make people do their work. You can't force it on people, but it's I guess the best way, someone did describe what I do in this way, and I really like the concept. It's polarizing. There'll be people
Yeah.
that organically will connect with it, and the people that straight away they're already putting up barriers, roadblocks, walls. And all I can do is, like I said, give some information
Yeah.
and also share some stories to hopefully help break down those barriers.
Mhm.
Um, I think the longer I've done it, the easier it is to deal with that because it does it. What it feels like is rejection, and it
Mm,
feels like I'm not good enough, and it feels like I'm not being seen and heard, which brings up like all my shit. So
yeah,
in the past, I have felt like I'm 15, standing in front of maybe 400 or 500 people,
yeah,
and out of that 400 or 500 people, what I will laser in on are the one or two people with their arms folded. There may be 498 people smiling, connecting, nodding,
yeah,
but of
yeah,
course, with that negativity bias in our brain, we're going to zero in on a couple of people we know aren't getting it.
yeah,
And then we're focused on them, and then we're second guessing, do I share this? Do I not share it? And one of the things that I would hold back on would be anything Te Ao Māori, depending on my audience. I'd be, there's some bias in this, but I'd look out there and go, all right, I'm in this particular place in New Zealand,
yeah,
probably not going to connect to what I'm saying, so I'm not going to share that because I was
yeah,
scared of the potential rejection. Whereas now I will say it how it is, and if you don't like it, that's okay. You're
yeah,
not ready yet.
yeah,
And I think self awareness is something we don't talk enough about. And I I've said this before, so I'll say it again. So somewhere between only around 10 to 15% maybe of a school staff room
yeah.
are actually self-aware, which means the majority of people aren't self-aware. They don't
Correct.
know how they are or how they're perceived by other people. And I've said this before lots too. Like if there's a mirror and we look in the mirror, some people will not see their real reflection staring back at them. Right? I don't know if you guys are like me, but you can go shopping in stores like I don't know, you might be saying farmers, and you're walking past the mirror and you take a little glimpse at yourself and be like, yeah, shit, I look all right. And you'll be in another store and you're like, shit,
Yeah,
I just gained like 30 pounds just crossing the road and going to another store, right? And I think that's what it's like. We don't actually we're not aware. So for me, the more I delved into this work, the more aware I become. But also I have a wife that one day had enough of me and told me exactly how, so the book told me how I was. And I was like, wow. And I didn't know that's how I was. And I explained this to someone in Vancouver the other day that
mhm,
in my professional life, I was doing really well.
yeah,
Now, school was high performing academically, socially, and emotionally, given awards, and people were saying nice things about me, but I wasn't received that same way at home.
yeah,
But I was unaware. It wasn't until my wife told me exactly how I was, and then I stepped back and I was like, "Oh wow, how did I not see this all in front of my face?"
yeah,
So, and that was hard to sit with that and be told you're not the partner you think you are, you're not the father you think you are, you're not the grandfather you think you are, that you're not present. There was, I think I told the story in the book, but I remember being on my laptop one day. I was a principal at the time, and it was in the evening, and my wife said to me, "When are you going to be finished with work?" I said, "Oh, probably about an hour." Anyway, about an hour and a half went past, and she said, "Are you still doing work?" I said, "Yeah." Then she said to me, "I think you're just making up work now." And she caught me out. Like I was. I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but dealing with the
yeah,
reality of being a partner and parent was just too much.
yeah,
So I was making work up to, you know,
yeah, yeah,
deflect and neglect and abandon everyone else in my life. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, but that's what's coming up for me.
yeah. The thing about identity is really, really interesting. I've had people say some things to me about who I am or, my identity.
Mm,
And it was really, really interesting hearing that. And I had never identified that, with myself. Um, Somebody once told me who I worked with, and they said to me, they said, you're really intimidating. And I said, how am I intimidating? I'm like the nicest person ever. I'm always being nice to people. And she said, no, you're intimidating because you know all this stuff and you share all this stuff, and it's really intimidating. And I said, but like I share all this stuff because, I want to share with people. I want to help people, become inclusive and da da da. And I did not realize that me simply being who I am or just sharing
mm,
things was making somebody feel intimidated because they didn't have that knowledge or they didn't have that
right.
understanding.
So,
And
so Freon, growing up as a child, like when you were a child growing up, academically at school, you were praised for doing well academically.
yes,
Yeah. See how this
Yes.
links up? It makes sense,
Yes,
right?
and in my
So
head,
that's
so
part
this
of the
is the thing,
identity.
right? Yes, this is the thing, the
Mm,
whole, and this is why I think a lot of the, if I learn more, I'll be a better person. And
yeah.
this work honestly has helped me realize no matter how much I learn, if I keep triggering people because I make them feel less, valid
Mm,
or less knowledgeable or less authentic, less, accepted, then I will never be able to connect with them. So I think
yeah.
the self-awareness I feel is so iterative. You're always learning about yourself through
Mm,
others, through the situations and context you're in.
yeah.
And earlier I used to feel that, you have to have the self-identity and be sure of who you are. And this is it. Once you've established, that's it. But I've learned that's not what it is. Your self-awareness
Yeah.
and who you are is always growing and changing and evolving
Yeah.
based on where you are, what life is throwing at you, and what you need to
That's
do,
right.
isn't it? It's
So if
quite
you think about
interesting.
Freon, like if you think about the more knowledge you've attained, then you're also receiving probably praise then, right? Which will link back to your childhood. So as you attain more knowledge, it's not even about triggering other people. It's like who did you want to see you,
Yeah.
right? When you were a child, who was the person that you really wanted to see you and acknowledge you?
I think it's
That's
my
that's what's
parents.
showing up
It's
for you in
really
that moment, right?
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Same.
It is the
Yeah.
parents. And this is the thing, right? So I, for a very long time in my personal life, I've sort of been trying to support my husband because I know he's never had that real close connection with, his family,
Hmm.
whānau. And, he's different and he's always felt that he's different, in his skin.
Mm,
And, we've got a household with children who have disabilities and neurodivergence. And so all of that. And so I've always tried to help him feel like, it's okay who you are. You can be your authentic self and da da da. But the thing I've learned with identity is you cannot be your true self and you cannot hold your identity if you do not feel safe in that,
hmm.
whatever space you're in. And
Yeah.
I think safety comes from two things, not just the feedback that people are giving you, which is negative and not allowing
Hmm.
you to be, your authentic self or whatever. But I also think that safety can, you can move away from safety if you get a lot of that praise and you get all those expectations set up. And I've been going through so much of this, Jace, over the last sort of year, reflecting on myself. I'm like, where the heck is all this shit coming from? And I
Hmm.
realized it came from expectations that I had internalized. For a
Hmm.
while, I was like, I'm really annoyed with, my parents set me up for this and they praised me. Why
Yeah.
did they praise this and not this? And why did they, praise all my achievements or me giving to others? And now I've become a giver who's
Mm,
forever trying to give to people. But no,
right.
it wasn't even them. I realized actually it was me. And I really dug deep. And I was like, actually, I remember my mom praising me for something that was nothing to do with, you know, giving and nothing to do with achieving. But I didn't hold on to that. I held on
Hmm.
to certain things. And then
Yeah.
that is what shaped my identity. And so for me, it's really like I've got to shift my identity. I've got to move out of this, you know, identity that was created out of other people's expectations and
Mm,
create my own identity in terms of who I really want to be, and it's okay to move and shift your identity. I think so important. And my children teach me that. And I must say my husband as well, because, for me, I'm just like, you've got to have a positive identity. You've got to have a positive identity and own yourself. But, it's okay to have those low moments and it's okay to have those moments
mm.
where you're unsure of your identity and,
Yeah.
it's evolving and growing, isn't it? So,
It's the human experience, right? Like that we're humans. And that's, once society and once the education system in particular gets a hold of different concepts like regulation, they're expecting kids just to be nice and regulated all the time. And it's not how it
yes,
works. We're allowed to be angry. We're allowed to be upset. We just
yeah,
don't want to stay in that state, right? So,
yes,
um, and that's one of my issues with zones of regulation, is that we've made certain colors the pinnacle. No,
yeah,
you're allowed to
yeah,
feel let down, upset, pissed off, angry. You're allowed to feel like that. And then schools that don't do zones very well, like a kid will place themselves on it and they won't move all day. But
yeah,
within 10 minutes, we've had a range of emotions we've felt. So it's not accurate, right? So I think one of the concepts that you kind of alluded to there was like a felt sense of safety.
yeah,
And that's a concept that I really love, that it's felt and it's embodied. And again, we can only truly embody stuff if we've done the inner work. We
yeah,
know who we are, where we come from. We've explored where these triggers come from and why do I feel the way I do about it, which you just modeled for us how you can do that, looking back at our story. And if sometimes it's difficult for us to recall things in our past, then reconnect with people that were there,
yeah,
right? Because again, we can look in the mirror and not see the real us, but we also won't also see stuff that happened. When I'm around my younger brother, when I'm around my mother, sometimes they will bring up stuff, and I'm like, when did that happen?
yeah,
Because a lot of my memory's been shut out because that was the safest thing to do in that moment is just turn
yeah,
off. Um, so I think, yeah, felt sense of safety, and hopefully we don't, as an education system, wreck that concept too. But it's about it being embodied, and you can't tell anyone else how they feel,
yeah,
right? And one of my issues around gentle parenting is the validation of emotions. We
yeah,
can validate, sure, but let's do it when the child is actually in a regulated state, not when they're still in their moment of chaos where they can't even hear us physiologically.
yeah.
But we often do it because we're triggered, we're upset, that the child's
Mm,
upset. Well, this has nothing to do with the child in that moment. It has
yeah,
everything to do with our inner child and a moment and point in our life and our childhood where we weren't validated,
yeah,
where we didn't feel seen or heard or known or valued or loved, right? So,
yeah.
um, yeah, there's a lot of work that we have to do, and it seems never ending at times.
And I think it's so important to acknowledge that to our kids and the people that we are
Mm,
interacting, engaging with me. I've learned because I will sometimes, like you say, get triggered by something that, my son has said. So
hmm
it's really funny, but I really empowered. So I've got two children who don't communicate, verbally fluently, but my third one
hmm
does. And I really encouraged him to speak up for himself. And I said, you've got to speak up for yourself. If you don't share what you're thinking, what you're feeling, people aren't going to know. You've got to, sort of be your self advocate. And he does. And when he does, it triggers me because he tells me off. And he tells me that, I'm not listening to him. And, he's told me this like 10 times and I've just gone on about something and I haven't acknowledged him and not listened to him. And he will tell
mm
me, he'll call me out, and it really does trigger me. And sometimes I'll snap and then I have to go
hmm
back and I have to actually tell him, not just sorry. I've learned just saying, hey, sorry, I snapped is not good enough. I
mm
have made it a point to tell him, hey, I'm really sorry. That wasn't about you. That was me feeling
mm
bad about something else or me feeling bad
Right.
about, and I think it's so important because otherwise our kids carry that weight, isn't it? Knowing that I'm
mm
not good enough or, I'm not
Yeah.
adequate. Or I have to
And,
behave
and,
in a
and the snap's
certain way if I want
okay,
to keep mom happy.
right? Love is conditional. Love
Yeah,
is conditional as our children feel
yeah,
that. And you know
yeah.
what? The snap is okay as long as we're snapping less,
Yes,
right? And then you
yes,
also model that there was a rupture, but
yeah,
then there's a repair that would have happened soon afterwards. And
yeah,
probably
yeah,
if you went back in the way you parented over the
yeah,
years, you may not have been aware at the time, as I was speaking for myself here, that there was a rupture.
yeah,
So you wouldn't have done the repair work at the time. But now with the self-awareness comes the
yes,
ability to
yeah,
hold space for when they're in their
yeah,
chaos, and it will trigger us. And
yeah.
again, triggers aren't going away. It doesn't
No,
matter how much internal work we do on ourselves,
yeah.
you will always be triggered by the same thing. But the feeling won't hang around as long,
Yes,
right? The
yes,
more we're aware of it and the more we're doing the healing around it. So the ability to help repair that rupture and hold space
yeah,
increases over time. But again, the snap, it's the human experience again. It's okay to snap,
yeah,
just not all the time
yeah.
and not with the same, what's the word I'm looking for? Intensity,
Yes,
right? Because I think about sometimes I've
yeah,
snapped and they're pretty
yeah,
intense and people felt it. And now they're less intense, which is still interesting because my youngest daughter will still swear
yeah,
that it's just as intense. It's not,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But she's got a new dad now, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
A dad that
absolutely.
is better regulated, more self aware.
Yeah,
So for her, when I'm just saying, hey, you need to stop that, just checking her on how she is, that
Yeah.
is intense for her now. In the past, you can multiply that by like a million, how I used to be.
Yeah.
But she has a new dad now, even though it's the same dad.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
for me, the most beautiful thing, honestly, Jace, has been seeing my son come back to me and apologize without me
Mm,
asking for any apology when he
right.
has snapped. That's been the most beautiful thing. It's brought tears to my eyes because I have not asked him for an apology when he snapped at me.
Mm,
And I've called him out and said, hey, that's not okay, or, and I've managed to regulate myself. And he's just come back and gone, hey, mommy, I'm sorry I snapped. It's kind of dragged out,
mm,
but it's there and it's
right.
heartfelt. And the amazing thing is
Yeah.
his father still struggles to apologize. He cannot apologize and he will not apologize for
Yeah.
days. And his son is able to do it within hours. And so that's been the most amazing thing for me, I guess, in terms of applying a lot of this work in my
Mm.
own home and with my own family, not just in terms of out there sort of fixing the system or
Mm.
making places more inclusive. So I think that's been really,
There's a system you can fix. There is a system you can fix, and it's your own system, right?
yes,
Your
that's
internal
right.
system, your whānau system. You can do
Yeah,
the work
yeah,
there, and then absolutely, it's going to have an impact as it goes outward. Now, someone somewhere that would have been just listening to you speak would have said that you're teaching emotional intelligence to your child. You're actually not. What you're doing is you're actually providing a model and example of what emotional intelligence is.
yeah,
That I realize I fucked up. Here's the repair,
yeah,
and I'm holding space.
yeah,
That builds emotional intelligence. So just like self-regulation, we don't teach it. What
yeah,
we do is we model it,
yeah,
and then they pick up on it organically. We don't have to.
absolutely.
Again, there is too much emphasis on trying to teach all these damn things.
Yeah,
Just actually embody it,
yeah,
and it becomes our way of being, and then they will embody it, and it becomes their way of being.
yeah, absolutely. Jace, now you've obviously, the title says it all. Your trauma has a whakapapa, and
Yeah.
you've talked about intergenerational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you've mentioned, and this is on page 75, you've mentioned the unspoken weight of generations sits in the background, shaping attitudes, reactions, and connections, right? And my understanding of intergenerational trauma used to be that it was just the big events that happened, the big things that happened in our ancestors' lives that sort of shaped the trajectory for us moving forward. But you've actually explained how it's all the little bits and pieces, isn't it? It's their nervous systems, their attitudes
Mm-hmm.
that sort of tend to shape us moving forward. Tell us a little bit about the neuroscience behind it, because I know for a fact, like we know about things like, um, hereditary sort of illnesses and diseases and things like that
Mm-hmm.
that sort of are passed down generation by generation. But we don't really know and understand how those attitudes, how we hold ourselves, how the anxiety levels that we are
Mm-hmm.
born with sometimes, come from that whakapapa, come from the lineage that's been passed on to us. Tell us a little bit more. I think it's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting to know about it, and it's something again that raises people's self-awareness. So just share a little about that, the neuroscience behind that intergenerational trauma, and
Yeah.
and how we hold all of it, and it comes into our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I think of trauma, I stay away from big T trauma, little T trauma.
Yeah.
I stay away from it because it's incredibly invalidating of the human experience and what people have been through.
True.
Because if someone had experienced sexual violence as a child,
Yeah.
and then someone else had experienced neglect, maybe exclusion from a friend group, peer group,
Mm.
the feeling for each of those people could feel very much the same. even though they are very different experiences. So to label one as being worse than the other, it's just not helpful, right? So if I draw on a story from, I think it might be in the book, from one of my own stories. So I really don't like people being behind me. So when I go into a space in a room, I will have my back to the wall, or I'll make sure no one can kind of get behind me. And I've always been like that. I've only been aware of that for about the last 10, 15 years, though. I've only been aware of why for about the last 2 or 3 years. So, so if I think back to my dad, he was grabbed off the streets from behind, grabbed, chucked into a van, and then ended up down in Otago, like I shared before. My granddad, my mum's dad, fought in World War II. His dad fought in World War One. So when you're in a world war, you're being pursued by people. People are attacking you from behind and front and sideways. But so when I think about trauma has a whakapapa, then I start to understand maybe there's a reason why I'm reacting or responding in the way that I do based on those couple of little stories that I actually know. I won't go into detail with this one because it's not my story to tell, but an incident happened to my mum when she was younger, and she was left her family for a little bit. And interestingly, about 4 years ago, we're doing Christmas shopping together. And my mum would have been around, gosh, how old would she have been? Late 60s at the time. And my mum turns into James Bond before my eyes. We're walking across the street. She like ducks down beside a car. And I'm watching this woman like, what are you doing? And then she runs as fast as her little 60-plus-year-old legs can carry her. She runs into a store and she hides behind the door. And I follow her and I say, Mum, what are you even doing? And she said, oh, it's so-and-so. I don't want to talk to them. And I thought it was such bizarre behavior. When I rang my wife that night and talked about what Mum was doing, like trying to dodge someone, my mum said, yeah, you do the same. My wife said, you do the same thing. I said, what do you mean? You do exactly the same stuff. And then I had to sit back and reflect. It was like, oh, yeah, should I do? I have exactly the same behavior. When I shared earlier about the keeping myself busy on my laptop, my mum constantly is cleaning, working, even though there's no one to clean after, she just constantly cleans. My memory of my nana, she's focused in the book. I think chapter 2 or 3 is a whole chapter on it. But when I think of my nana, every time we went to visit her, she was always busy, always cleaning. But the house was spotless. So there is a whakapapa on my mum's side of always staying busy. Now, if we're staying busy, you know what we don't have to do? Deal with the reality of the present moment or what happened to us. So that's what I mean by trauma has a whakapapa, that it started somewhere. It doesn't have to be this big bad event that has shaped generations. It can be as simple as neglect and abandonment. Right, a lot of my behaviors. My wife's made me aware of them. So things that probably annoy her the most about me are also traits that my mum has, that my nana has as well. So again, it doesn't have to be these big bad events. It can be something as simple as dodging people because you don't have the skills to sit and hold space. I know as an educator, I struggled to have tough conversations with colleagues. I would always defer, or I would delegate them to a DP or an AP or team leaders. Like, I think this is your one to deal with them, because I didn't have the skills. Because growing up as a kid, we didn't get to negotiate. We didn't get to have conversations around when things weren't going well. We just got to hiding. So I didn't have the reps needed, the practice in dealing with tough conversations. It's not till now. Now I can have those conversations because now I have boundaries. In my 40s, now I have boundaries. The most beautiful thing for me is seeing my children, who are 2 of them in their late 20s and one is 17, and they all have pretty strong boundaries. And sometimes it can trigger me a little bit. So I feel really heartened by the next generation. And I think that's where, particularly in high schools, in intermediates, we get very dysregulated and triggered by children, because they'll say to us, why are we doing that? But it's a waste of time. We get really hurt by that stuff. Like, you and I probably never got to ask those questions at school.
Yeah.
because maybe we got beaten by the teacher or ridiculed or judged or shamed.
Yeah.
And then we went home and we got even worse. So we just sat there
Yeah.
as compliant, controlled little good
Yeah.
citizens who would go on to pay their taxes.
Yeah.
And that's the system in lots of ways, right?
It-
So,
It's so interesting you mentioned that, Jace. About how we sort of learn things from our families, and that
mm,
pattern carries on, isn't it? And when
yeah.
you talk about it this way, I think about trauma as literally our nervous system default, where we sit at
Hmm.
what our default patterns and reactions and
Yeah.
um, y- you know the way we show up in the world is really it's that whole package, isn't it? And I grew up in a family where my mom always encouraged. So I was always a loud kid, out there kid, lots of energy, lots to share, very much about this is fair and this is not fair, and all of that. And my mom always encouraged me to feel my feelings. She
Mm,
she would say things like, if I was crying, she would say, "It's okay, let it all out, let it all out." She never shamed me for crying. She never said it wasn't okay to cry, it was weak to cry.
mm,
Never. She, sort of encouraged me. My husband grew up very differently. He was encouraged not to cry. He was encouraged never to share. And in his family, sharing emotions wasn't a
hmm,
thing. So for me, sharing emotions or having an argument is a big deal. Like, you just talk it out, you
mm,
hash it out, you can give it a good shot, and it's okay to argue and have conflict. It's good. It's
mm,
unpacking everything and moving forward. Whereas my husband shies away from conflict because for
mm,
him, conflict is not safe, it's not done. You do not express your emotions, and you're supposed to hold it in and keep going. And
mm.
it's hilarious when I look at things now from this whole nervous system lens, me chasing him going, talk to me, tell me, talk to me, tell me, like,
Oh,
let's
wow.
hash it out. And him trying to
Yeah.
run away, keep himself safe. And until I understood all of this, I couldn't understand why we were that dynamic of me, going, what's wrong with conflict? There's nothing wrong with conflict, and him going, no, conflict ruins, the peace. So
Mm.
so important, isn't it, that we yeah are aware of what's happening in our nervous systems. Yes.
There's Freon. That is literally the same story of my wife and I. She needed time and space. I needed things to be fixed, probably like your husband, because then we go back to the status quo. Because as a child, it wasn't so much when the noise happened. It's like what was coming next, right? So I didn't like that space where my wife needed the time and space. So it took us a number of years before we could actually both listen to each other, hold space for each other, with empathy and compassion. And now we're able to. So we don't really argue anymore. We will disagree, but we have the emotional intelligence now and the understanding of this relational neuroscience to hold space for each other. And man, it makes relationships so much easier. But when you're not modeled that, like that's certainly not what was modeled for me as a child. I just saw conflict when things got hard. And then, like I said, as a principal and as a teacher, I just didn't have the skills because I'd never experienced enough of it. So again, don't teach emotional intelligence. You have to experience it over and over and over, and then it becomes your way of being. And you just described that perfectly because that's your way of being because it was validated from your mum.
No, absolutely. I've got one question. I know we're coming to the close of our time, but I've got heaps of questions actually, but I'm gonna
Okay,
definitely make
cool.
sure we talk about a couple of them. One is forgiveness. And
Hmm.
as I was going through this book, and you talked about how now that you know better, you understand your dad did the best he could, everybody
Mm,
does the best they can. Um, for me, that forgiveness, what helps you come to that point of forgiveness,
mm,
where you can let go and you can forgive people who may have harmed you because of their own trauma. I think
mm,
knowing all of that, understanding where people are coming from, um, and sort of letting go of it
mm,
It's so essential, isn't it, as part of your healing journey? But where and how do you
hmm.
arrive at that? And the other
Yeah.
thing is, it's one thing to let go for something that's happened in the past because it's not happening now. But what when something is still happening? What when people who are carrying their trauma are showing up in ways that are harmful for you, that are hurtful for you?
Mm,
How then do you set some of those boundaries? How do you make sure you are safe, but
mm,
you're also able to hold space for somebody else? It's really, really
yeah.
hard, isn't it? What has, in your experience, allowed you to do that, some of that?
Mm. I always have like it's minor, but a visceral reaction when I hear the word forgiveness.
Yeah.
And I'm still not quite sure why yet. I've still got to do some work around that.
Yeah.
I wonder, I wonder if it's because that wasn't modeled again for me growing up.
Yeah.
I know in my life, like saying the words "I'm sorry," I found that hard in
Yeah.
my life. Even when I am sorry to actually say
Yeah.
the words, it's been really hard. I know as an adult, as an educator, I was forced to say sorry for something, and I wasn't sorry, but I did it because it put out a fire that could have been made a larger fire. And upon reflection, I wish I had boundaries then and said no and been my authentic
Mm.
self and said why.
Mm.
So I think because of those experiences, I do struggle with that concept. Um, I think for me, understanding why is so important.
Yeah.
Why did my dad parent that way? Why did my mum parent that way? Why am I the way I am?
Yeah.
So I guess in some way, you could argue that it allows me to forgive not so much even them. It's just knowing that I did the best I could in
Yeah.
that position,
Yeah.
that they did the best they could, which I guess again you could argue is forgiveness. But
Yeah.
to say the word, yeah, I'm still struggling with that one at the
Yeah.
moment. So I will spend some time trying to figure out why. Why do I feel that way? But I think grace is really important.
Yeah.
Um, to see people with grace and humility again that they did the best they could,
Yeah.
and that's been new for me to having to do that because I would cut people off and be real negative because
Yeah.
that was self protection. I
Yeah.
didn't have to feel hurt from what they did. So if
Yeah.
I cut you off first, then I do this, and I have to deal with the emotions
Yeah.
because they certainly weren't validated as yours were as a child. Like we weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
No one said don't show your emotions, but it
Yeah.
was pretty obvious not to. So I think that's where I am with that. Now, your other question was,
So the other question is about what when it's happening in the moment. So, as in
okay,
you are engaging, interacting with somebody who is carrying a whole lot of trauma. And we do come
mm-hmm,
across,
mm-hmm,
whether it's work, whether it's personal lives, and they are causing hurt and harm to you. They are showing
mm,
up, in ways that are affecting you negatively. How do you then
gotcha,
set those boundaries? How do you then
yeah,
set boundaries but still hold space for them?
yeah.
Sometimes you
I
can't
think it's
get
a similar
away from a
response.
situation. You can't just walk
No,
away or get away sometimes.
right.
Yeah.
And interestingly, that's what our nervous system wants to do. It wants to leave. When we feel like that, we want to leave, and that's what
Yeah.
fight, flight, freeze, or fawn are designed for—to disappear, to
Yeah.
leave. Um, and I guess you can argue if we're trying to leave and we're not leaving, we're probably in a freeze response or a shutdown, a mobilization in that moment. So I think for me, it's trying to regulate myself in that moment, trying to ground myself.
Yeah.
And one of the grounding practices I use is to simply focus on pushing my feet through the ground.
Yeah.
So I picture my feet. So my somatic guide, Jacinta, will talk about standing in my mana,
Yeah.
and knowing that I'm not there alone, that I come there with my ancestors.
Yeah.
Scientifically, around 260 ancestors are inside our body cells at any given moment with us. And, just stand in my mana, but then picture pushing my feet through the ground very firmly, picturing that I'm smashing the concrete below me. That's what I try and do. And that allows me to stay present because what happens is when we are dysregulated and triggered by others, the inner child comes up in that moment. They show up. And my inner child that I know is either a 5-year-old or 15-year-old, and they're not going to be helpful in that moment. So grounding myself allows me to remain not just physically present, but also mentally and emotionally there, which means they disappear. They're no help in that moment. So grounding is a practice I use. Breath work has been helpful for me.
Yeah.
The breathwork technique I like the most is the physiological sigh. So
Yeah.
2 quick breaths through the nostrils,
Yeah.
exhale through the mouth. So do maybe 3 or 4 of those. And the beauty of that breathwork technique is that you can do that, and perhaps people around you don't even know you're doing it. It's kind of a bit of an incognito one. Whereas if some people to regulate themselves will use tapping, and like if you're tapping, that's
Yeah.
visible to everybody around you.
Yeah.
So some people may not tap in front of other people. So
Yeah.
that's not. I mean, I've tried tapping. It's not for me. I've tried it. It hasn't worked yet. So breath work, and then by going through that process, by grounding myself and regulating my own nervous system, it means that I'm able to access my prefrontal cortex,
Yeah.
where I can hold space for that other person.
Yeah.
And then it's just listening. Like the key to all of this is listening.
Yeah.
Just sitting with people and listening. And again, we can only do that if we have done our own inner work. Otherwise, it'll be tainted by our own story. And even when people have shared with me their trauma, there are times where I'm triggered because perhaps their story is really close to my story. And that's hard because I'm
Yeah.
no longer present with them, even though I'm sitting with them.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about my nana, or I'm thinking about my dad, or when
Yeah.
this person did that to me.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, grounding and regulating our own nervous system is important, but also holding space for someone else and seeing them through a compassionate, empathetic lens, because more often than not, we are talking to an adult,
Yeah.
but in that moment, maybe they are 10 years of age, and it's holding space for that little 10-year-old child in them, because that's where the words come from, the language, when they're frustrated, upset, swearing at us, whatever,
Yeah.
putting us down, because grown adults that are regulated don't do that. This is a hurt version of them that's doing it. So, yeah, grace, humility, compassion, empathy.
And I think listening with empathy, without
Mm-hmm.
judgment,
Yes.
without triggering yourself is again that
Yeah.
self-awareness, isn't it? You've got to have the self-awareness
Yeah.
as soon as you start venturing into linking to your own story rather than staying with them, holding space for them.
And
Um,
sometimes, Freon, it's leaving. Sometimes we do have to disconnect physically,
yeah,
right, from them
yeah,
because it's just we don't have the energy or the
yeah,
capacity in that moment
yes,
to hold space for them, or we're that dysregulated that it's not going to be helpful for either of us. So
true,
sometimes we do have to disconnect. Now, when
yes,
we disconnect from someone that needs us the most,
yeah,
we call that neglect and abandonment. So
yeah,
we are very much feeding into the chaos that's already inside this person,
yeah,
but let it be temporary and it's necessary
yes,
because we can't help in the state and space we're in.
yeah,
So sometimes teachers ask me, "Have we got a child in class and they're in a real chaotic moment and they're threatening to stab everybody in the classroom with a pair of scissors?"
yeah,
Is the advice we've been told from intervention and Ministry of Education to remove everyone else? Is that still the right advice? It's absolutely it is.
yeah,
And because they've been listening to me speak, they'll say to me, "Isn't that neglect and abandonment of the child that's in the chaos?" Yes, it is. But it's temporary and it's necessary. And we are going to, or somebody else that has a better connection perhaps than us with the child, is going to do the repair of that rupture.
yeah,
But right now, we need to make sure that potentially 30 children aren't stabbed
yeah,
right now.
yeah.
But the repair absolutely will happen.
Yeah. And I think this is where safety comes first.
Mm,
Like having worked with my own children, like from
yeah.
in my head, the whole thing is always safety first, and
Mm-hmm.
then, making sure that you're offering that co-regulation, but you have to have the safety first.
Yeah.
Without that, you're not going to be safe either to be able to
That's right.
co-regulate. So it's so essential, isn't it, that you do make sure that
Yeah.
safety comes first. Now, look,
Yep.
this has been so, so, so helpful. And I'm sure it's gonna, because we've got practical stuff that you've shared as well that people can take away from. And thank you so much for all the work you keep doing in this space, Jace. It is so, so valuable. And I do hope that, more people read your book and more people, begin their own journey in terms of embodying all the learning that we're sharing out, because that is, a journey in itself. So thank you for all your mahi over these years and for sharing, so openly and really do appreciate all of that. So kia ora.
Cool. Thank you so much.
I'm going to
Kia ora
close
to
us with
everybody that showed up.
Yes, at 7 a.m. And it wasn't the wrong time when I said 7 a.m. I had a few emails. Did you mean 7 p.m.? And I was like, no, I meant 7 a.m. So thank you. And thank you for taking the time in the middle of your busy schedule. You've set us up really well for the year ahead. And and I do hope we get to see you sometime in Auckland, Jace. We'll catch up on that another time. But kia ora, everyone. Have a lovely day. I will close us with a karakia and then you're ready to go off on your day. So karakia whakamutunga, kia whakairia, te tapu, kia wātia, ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai. Hau mie, hui e, taiki e.
Taiki e.
Kia ora, have a lovely day.
Thanks, Jase.
Kia ora.